Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Plotlines. I'm your host, Connor, and today we are talking about building a wholesome family in a broken world by Archduke Eduard Habsburg. And with me to discuss that is himself, His Imperial and Royal Highness Archduke Eduard Habsburg, Ambassador to the Holy See from Hungary. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing really well, and thank you for having me on your wonderful show.
It's a great honor and a pleasure. Now, it's quite an interesting book in so far as you're dealing with family. You're not dealing with necessarily like history, though history is a part of it. So, can you tell us just a little bit about the book for anyone who's interested?
Well, for those who read my first book, The Habsburg Way, that was more about my family history and our principles as a family, and a few lessons for today. This one here is really diving into what makes a good spouse, good engagement, good marriage, and having children, education, all of that tick. And it's peppered with Habsburg examples. I hope a few of them will stick to the minds of the readers. But it's not first and foremost a Habsburg history book. The first one was more of that, and my idea was basically looking around that I realized that some people don't really seem to. Well, many people don't seem to get that family thing working in our Western society, and I had a very good experience. We have 6 children. I have a wonderful wife. Next year it'll be 30 years that we're married, and we still love each other very much. In fact, I always point out that I love my wife far more than when we got engaged, and that is a very hopeful message. So I thought I'd write a book about it, and that's how that book came about.
That's great. And you mentioned, how much you love your wife and how that's grown. I think some people have a hard time imagining that, maybe because their definition of love is wrong. So could you talk or tell us what you mean by love?
What I mean by love is my idea is that if you follow God's plan for your marriage, and if you really put God in the center of your relationship from the beginning, then He will keep every fire kindled between the two of you, the fire of your faith, the fire of attraction, the fire of knowing and understanding each other far more. Um, I find my wife beautiful. I hope she does find me beautiful too. All of this is possible if you get your priorities right when you decide to get married. When you don't, if you don't have your relationship backwards, if you don't begin with having an intimate relationship and then try to get towards marriage and all that, because that's the wrong way. If you try to live chastely, if you try to go for all these things that sound so boring and old-fashioned, if you go for all these things, then I can't guarantee, because we're all sinners and full of mistakes, and we make terrible things in our life because we're broken, like the world is. But if you do all of this, you have a fairly good chance of having a lifelong, very happy, very fulfilling marriage. And I think that's what everybody really wants, if they had the choice. So I'm trying to give a few signposts from our life, but also a few things from Habsburg history, that yeah. So when I mean love, I really mean love. I really mean love, and I mean being in love. The idea that most people have is that you're in love for a few weeks or months, and then that fades away, and then it gets dreary every day. It's so wrong. And the funny thing is, when I've been giving interviews for this book now quite a few weeks already, and whenever I speak with men who interview me, they all agree with me. I mean, it's mostly married men, who have children, who are married. I just spoke a few days ago with somebody who has 7 children, is married more or less the same time than I am. And he said it's exactly that. He loves his wife far more. And you're not just in a, I really have to love her because we're married, so we have to be nice to each other kind of way. But really, you really love her. You really love her. You find her attractive. And I believe if you do this right, then happiness is not just a word. Then you have a very long and happy marriage. And the ingredients are all there, and I speak about them. And one important ingredient is having lots of children. Now people will tell you, no, having children is bad. You don't have time for each other. You can't do all the fun things you did before. You always have to look after the children. It's totally wrong. If you have children and lots of children, then God will transform you into what you're really supposed to be, and you will grow even closer to your wife. So yeah, all these things in my book.
Indeed. I'm kind of the odd man out when it comes to interviewing you then, because I'm not married and I don't have any kids.
Well, the book has been written for you. If you're not just read it for preparation for the interview, but saying, could this actually be something for me or not? I mean, this is a very Catholic book. So I know that for people who are not Catholic, this may be a bit of a tough sell. And you know, it takes something to buy into my premises. And we live in a world where chastity is unthinkable. It's impossible. We have pornography everywhere, and people are ready for relationships without any responsibility. Girls, throw yourself at you. Why should you resist? Why should you try to live in a chaste way? And I believe that the Catholic Church has it right. I also say in my book that if you're not Catholic, you should become a Catholic. If you're not married, you should marry a Catholic. Not because I'm a Catholic, but because I believe that the Catholic Catholic Church has in a unique way the teaching, the spiritual helps, and the practical helps to make a marriage work. So yeah,
If
but
you're watching this
we can go.
podcast, you should become Catholic.
We yes, I don't know. Are you Catholic? I didn't even ask Connor. Are you Catholic? I suppose with a
Yes.
sacred hardish image behind you and an icon somewhere behind your shoulder, I would guess you're Catholic.
I thought you would have known this by now.
Yes, sorry. I come from somewhere very else, Connor, and we interact on Twitter, but I have so many talks and meetings.
I
I'm
know.
just
I know.
asking. Yeah.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
Yes, of course. You should as an interviewer.
But yes, I am. But yeah, so so I'm kind of people like me is definitely what this book is speaking to. I mean, it really does lay out. I mean, especially if you have no idea what you're doing, if you're just, if you maybe didn't come from a very Catholic family and you're maybe just getting into your Catholic faith, this is the ideal book to give you the guidance into what you're looking for in a marriage, or how to build a family. I mean, also it's you mentioned how crazy people think it is to be chaste. I bet they think it's even more crazy for royalty to be chaste.
Absolutely, because in every single film we've seen that those royals all can get all the girls they want and are rich and lie on the decks of yachts, and all the peasants around them has to serve them, and all of that, all of that. Well, the Habsburgs were never that way. I mean, of course, all of us are sinners, but I have the impression that the Habsburgs really tried to live their life in a Catholic way, and that meant chastity. And I have quite a few examples in my book about Habsburgs who were famously chaste. Not the weirdest and smelliest and loneliest ones, but really cool ones who were chaste people and were rewarded by an especially long and happy marriage. So that's one of the points. I say, my father always said, if you're not faithful to your wife before you marry her, you won't be faithful to your wife in your marriage. And I believe that if you try to live chastely before your marriage, you will have a very, very happy marriage and be faithful to your wife. And that's the experience of all my friends who try to live family the way they live it. But it sounds totally crazy. It sounds like, poor guy, he's from an old family, doesn't know how normal life is. And people seem to believe that teenagers are animals who just can't fight their urges, who just are dragged along by whatever comes their way. But we're not like that. We're sinners, clearly. We're broken. We're human. But we're not animals. So all of that is possible, but I think with prayer, with grace, with the sacraments. And that's why I insist so strongly on the Catholic point. In fact, as you may have noticed when I write the book, I have a bucket list, what I call is a checklist that you should always have, under your arm when you look at a girl and think about, could this be the one? You should take out your checklist and not let your feelings guide you towards that girl, but then put on your little glasses, take on a severe look, and check your checklist. And I have that in my book. I have several points on that. And I believe that's very important. Not listen to the world who tells you, if your feelings tell you she's Mrs. Right, then you have to follow it. What can you do against your feelings? You're helpless. Your feelings always win. You have to follow them until the next girl comes along where your feelings tell you that she's the right one. And then you have to follow her. It's your feelings. It's like a tornado. You can't stop it. And that, of course, is nonsense.
Indeed, it's like if if you followed your feelings on every person you date, you'd think you need to marry 100 different people or something like that.
Exactly. As I say in the book, at some point, your feelings might lead you to the right person indeed, but ask your parents, ask your friends who are married, ask them how often they were in love with someone and how often they got married. So that's why a checklist. That's why a checklist comes in very handy, and I suggest one that I made up out of our experiences, and I believe. Well, my daughter just got engaged, another one of my children, and I believe, I want to pride myself to believe that she followed a few of the ideas in the checklist. Because, of course, as you know, parents like to share their great ideas around their children. And don't tell my younger children, we already arranged for their marriages, but they don't know. And the great thing is when they find out that they don't have to get into the dating game, it's all settled already since years. I'm kidding.
I don't know anyone who likes the dating game anyways. No, yeah, you're kidding, but I don't even know anyone who likes the dating game.
I think quite a lot of people, because the dating game is the only kind of love we ever get to see in movies, in films, in series. We never get happy married couples. We get people looking for finding love, having an affair, breaking off. We see that. We never see the what you do it for. So, but of course, I think Catholic dating or courtship is something very different if you do it right. And uh, you you might have to go actively to look for someone, because the right person might not just drift through your neighborhood and get stuck in the bar around the corner. But if you're looking for someone who has your faith, who has your ideas about family, who tries to live a chaste life, and somebody whom you perhaps want to have a large family with all the consequences that this will have in your life, that's someone very special. And that's not someone that might just drift by. She may drift by, but don't count on it.
Yeah, so so you've got the checklist for what to look for, but where are you supposed to go find women these days? That's the real question I think a lot of men have.
As I said in my book, if you hunt for buffalo, you have to go to the watering hole. And if you look for a Catholic spouse, you have to go to Catholic places. That's maybe a parish, that may be a retreat, that may be a youth meeting, a pilgrimage, a conference. And I give you one example. I just went to a conference in Dallas where we spoke about Blessed Emperor Karl. There were hundreds and hundreds of people there, many of them young. And the day after, a family with a big house offered to host a dating meeting. And they just asked all the young people who wanted to learn more about dating and perhaps meet other Catholics like-minded to come. And I spoke there, my son spoke there, it was very nice. And there were more young men than women there, which is something that you wouldn't imagine. Most girls think that only women want to marry and men don't. There were more young men than women there, and they were about 40 and 40. or a bit more men. It was incredible. And they spent a day, they had a buffet, we had talks, we gave, experiences from marriage and from dating world. I have no idea whether this leads somewhere, but this is what you have to do. You have to actively look for that. There are some people who say you might even go on Catholic dating apps. I have no experiences with that. I was lucky enough to find my wife without that, but it may be the right thing. I know one couple in Hungary who are both Catholics and devout Catholics who met through a Catholic dating app. They're now married, have several children, are very, very happy, and far younger than I am. So this happened a few years ago. So you have to ask yourself what you want. What I think in my book is I say is that you can go into the relationship game where you have one intimate relationship after the other for the adventure and the kick of it, and then break it off and then begin a new one. And I believe that with each of these relationships, your chance for a lifelong happy marriage gets diminished. And after a while, it's broken. It's practically impossible for you to get into a normal relationship anymore, a lifelong one. So I want to encourage parents to encourage their children not to even begin to play that game when they come into the dating world in school. Don't play along with it. Just keep yourself with your eyes peeled for the person for life. And that may take a while, and that may mean sacrifice, and that may mean seeming dull and boring and uncool. But you play the long game. You, as I say in my book, you put all your money on red. You go for the big shot, and not for many, many little things that in the end don't bring you anywhere. So that's my take. I would want parents to read that book and talk to their, of course, age appropriate, to their children when they're still in primary school and before it gets serious. Because much of what I'm telling you now is something that kids learn that automatically when they're in a numerous family. One of the core points of my book is have lots of children. If you look at my first book, the first point of the Habsburg 7 rules is get married and have lots of children. This book is exactly that. This is get married and have lots of children. And I believe if you have a numerous family, if you have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 siblings, then you learn all these things about marriage, about family, about who are the right people that you get along with, all of that. You learn all of that automatically. It's far less work for the parents to teach you everything because it works just by, if you're with many siblings, you are not automatically the center of the universe. You can't be because there's more. You are not entitled to always have the latest iPhone because your parents can't afford it. You may have to share computers with your siblings. All of that stuff give you a human education that is far more difficult if you're a single child. You have to learn all of this by teaching of your parents, by everyday life, but it's so much easier when you have lots of siblings. I didn't ask Connor how many siblings you have, but
I
we
have
were
three.
three. We were three, for instance. It was a small family, but I had like 26 cousins. So we spent every summer with lots of cousins. That helped.
Yeah, I have 3 siblings.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, that's already a big family. In Europe, that's a huge family.
and to me, that's a small family.
Yeah.
Or medium to small, I guess, something like that.
Yes.
But okay, yes. So what advice do you have for parents who are afraid of having so many kids? Like, seems like a lot of work, a you know they can probably barely imagine having more than 2, like what's your advice for them?
I speak a lot about these topics in my book. So I would suggest all of you to buy it and to read it because there is a lot in there, a lot of experience. For those who say we can barely manage 2 children, have a third one. It sounds very strange, but I've spoken so often with couples who all say the same thing. When you have 2 children, you think you're breaking apart at the seams. You will never be able to do it. The third one comes along and everything becomes easier. Mostly because the children form a gang. The moment they are 3, They're a gang. They don't need you that much anymore. And until you have two, they both expect everything from the parents. Once they're three, it's very different. It's a very different ball game. And of course, four, five, six, everything gets easier. That's one thing. So don't be afraid of more than two children. The second is, I live in Italy, and Italy used to be the country of children. If you look at documentaries and films from the 1930s, 40s, 50s, every village is filled to the brink with children. In fact, if you want to see it, there's a very famous movie by Federico Fellini, famous Italian director. It's called La Strada. It's a neo-realistic, black and white, semi-documentarian drama story about two circus people who travel the Italian countryside and make performances. He's Anthony Quinn, and she's Giulietta Massina, and it's a dramatic, beautiful film. But mostly you see the villages in the 50s that are as children to the horizon. And now, when you travel through Rome, for instance, in the car, you won't ever see children. And I remember I arrived here in Rome in 2015, and about 3 years later, I drove through Rome and I saw a pregnant woman crossing the zebra, and I said, "Wow, a pregnant woman, how nice!" And then I said, "That was the first pregnant woman I've seen in 3 years." So
Oh my.
that's the reality. The reality is that people just have said no to children. And in Italy, the reason very strongly is it's not reasonable. We cannot afford it. We would love to. When they see children, they freak out. But they say, no, no, not for us. Unfortunately, it's not reasonable. It's too expensive. We cannot afford it. To which I say, of course, it's going to be expensive, and it's going to be there are going to be moments when it's very difficult. I wasn't always a diplomat. I was a script writer, and I worked for the church, and that's when my family grew, not when I had the security of a job as an ambassador. Um, and I want to tell you, we are living in the wealthiest, most secure period of Western history over the last millennia. The idea that we cannot afford to have large families in this time, when our ancestors in the 19th centuries had, of course, seven, eight, nine children, is absolutely ridiculous. Of course, it will have consequences. And of course, the media, entertainment, your online retailers will all tell you, forget it. You can't be spending anymore if you have many children. You can't have that wonderful, luxurious life that you want. But what you get is so much more. People cannot imagine the happiness of a large family because they usually never experience it. They never visit a family with seven or eight children. And for me, those few moments in my youth where I visited a big family, I always came away from these visits saying, they have something that I want to have. There was a camaraderie, a closeness, a having each other's backs, a looking out for each other. They were sure of themselves because they knew I've got my peer group, I've got my siblings. They will always have my back. If my parents die tomorrow in a car crash, we'll help each other. I won't drop into a hole. This is the gift and the beauty of a family. It's the greatest thing I've done in my life. I would give up everything else except my faith, of course, but everything else for the experience of the large family. And that's why I'm trying to get as many people to follow that path as possible. I believe large families for everybody. I hear so often, no, well, it's a bit like bonsai. If you're interested in private hobbies like bonsai, that's for you. But it's not, it's for very few people. I think it's wrong, absolutely wrong.
Well said. I have a niece, and I have a bunch of friends who are married and having children, and I just can't imagine anyone not wanting children when I just spend a little bit of time with my niece or my friends' kids. That it's just so beautiful. The joy you get out of children is so immense that it basically makes your whole day. And if you're a parent, you have that you have that all the time.
Yes, you also have the nights, of course, where you don't sleep. And sleep deprivation is something that really shakes people because it's only when the child arrives, and as my mother always used to say, kicks the last remains of egotism out of you, that you realize how granted you took sleep all your life, and that's a tough time, because we it's not by coincidence that in prisons and before trials, people were sleep deprived in order to terrorize them. But that's just a time. It's just the time. And then the time where you sleep comes back and you don't even remember how it was when you didn't sleep. And it's so consoling to know that all those little problems, goodness, and how am I going to change the diapers? And oh, but she's screaming. Does she have tummy ache? Is it the teeth? All of that is the story of humanity since 10 thousands of years. Every couple has lived through these things, and it's normal. It's okay. And I know so many stories of people who truly became what they were supposed to be through family. That's why I'm trying to convince as many people as possible to embark on this great trip. And I think it's beautiful what you say about when you spend time with your niece and with the family of your and their family, you realize that children are the greatest gift and the greatest happiness you can have. You know, I always ask, when did I realize that I did the right decision? I had when I got married to my wife, and my wife says it was when she held our first baby one evening, walking up and down in front of the room, and looked at it and said, "I've been looking for something all my life. Now I found it." And my moment was, I mean, I was always sure, but the moment when I sit with all of our children around the table and they're all talking at the same time and they're all chatting with each other, and you see the small ones watching the big ones and the big ones looking out for the small ones, and them wanting to eat, and everybody talking at the same time and still understanding each other. And you look around and you say, good Lord, what have we done? And at the same time, you say, this is the greatest thing in the world, the greatest thing in the world. So, what's also so great about having a family is you build your own little castle, your own little fortress, your own little state. You build your own little kingdom. In the Orthodox liturgy of the marriage, they hold two crowns over you when you got married, to symbolize that you begin a new kingdom. And the greatest thing about having a numerous family is you have a little community where you can impart your values, your ideas, without that the state, the media, the school can interfere. I mean, it sounds a bit menacing, but we live in times. My book is called Building a Wholesome Family in a Broken World. We live in a broken world. And there are many people out there who would like to fill your children's heads with such crazy ideas that they would explode if they would even know what's out there. And I think it's the privilege, the right, and the God-given task for the parents to give their children all the values, all the faith, all the knowledge that they should get, with the help of the state, with the help of the school, with the help of society, but first and foremost the parents. So the great thing is, with every numerous family, you have a little cell of a healthy world within our broken world. You have people who grow up, who learn all the values of compassion, friendship, faith, looking after each other. They learn all of that around the dinner table. And that's why I think every state should encourage families to have lots of children. Hungary, my state where I'm ambassador, does this. Hungary encourages families with help with taxes, with financial aid, and also with simply posters saying this is a family-friendly country. So everybody knows I'm welcome if I have a family. I'm not the odd one out who doesn't work all the time and therefore only has one child with 39, but I decide to go the path of family, which has consequences, but the state will have my back.
Yeah, in America, that's certainly not the feeling most people have with the state at the moment. So it's beautiful to have that there are states doing that. Um, Now, one of the things you bring up is in the book is you talk about children and traditions and family traditions and that sort of thing. Now, in the world we live in, it seems to me that most families have been almost stripped of their traditions by commercialization, by just sort of the abandonment of um, basically family history and that sort of thing. So, how can parents raise their children with traditions when they themselves were not necessarily given those tools?
Yes, very good question. If you look back at my first book, The Habsburg Way, there was one point which is called "Know who you are and live accordingly." And what this is a strong call to tradition, to know where you come from, to know what your family roots are, to know what your family traditions are. How did your grandparents celebrate Christmas? How did your parents celebrate birthday? What of that do we want to take into our family? Know where you come from. And you said correctly, many people don't know where they come from. And we are being encouraged by our technocratic rulers that we should not know where we come from, but we should be ready to change what we are every 5 minutes. Tomorrow we can be this, after tomorrow we can be that, and we'll only be happy if you run after every train until there's no more train to run after. And what I think is this is wrong. Now, if you don't have traditions, if you don't know where you come from, or if your family is something even that was very, very difficult for you and made you unhappy, if you don't want to take your traditions from your parents, your grandparents, then you can always take your traditions from the things that inspire you. I would say, if you like a Habsburg family, we took several centuries to figure out exactly who we are and what we stand for and what our roots are and what we want to stand for. I think every family can do the same thing. When you find that significant other and you begin to figure out, okay, we want to have a family, we want to have children, and then you get married and you're expecting your first child. Um, you should sit down and say, what are the things that are most important to us? Some people may say simply faith. If I can pass on my faith to my children, and then I have already given them a lot. And I agree with that. If you can pass on faith to your children, you've given them the central funding stone for their lives. And a lifelong friendship with God is the best way to be happy. But there is more. Many people find inspiration, for instance, in art, in beauty. Um, you you will have to fight for these values. If you live in the countryside, you don't have a nice museum near you, you don't have much beauty around you, you might have to have books at home. The good thing, the secret superpower of parents is that you actually can instill love in your children for things while they are still helpless. They don't realize what you're doing to them. So, as I say in my book, jokingly, but not really jokingly, is you can force them to later love the cheesy songs you loved when you were younger. You can play them. I played my children Beatles and Pink Floyd when they were far too young for that. And several of my children still have Pink Floyd and Beatles songs on their playlists because they believe they like the music. But of course, I played it to them when they were totally helpless. Now, that's of course a joke. But if you begin early to lead them towards beauty, lead them towards history, for instance, in a very age appropriate and very cautious way, because you might have passions for historical topics. The moment your children feel that there's too much passion in you about it, they might grow irritated. For a few years, they will take it, and then they will really get irritated if it comes from daddy or mommy. So one has to play this very, very carefully. I have a huge passion for the Roman Empire, for instance. And I'm in Rome. Imagine I could be turning my children's heads all the time, say, "Oh, over there, can I tell you a story?" That would be counterproductive. But as I say, you should think about the values you want to pass on, because you can be almost certain that there's a good chance that in your school you won't get them. In a school, you will get a very different set of values, and you want to have your children understand the world as it is, faith as it is, core values as they are, before they ever get to school. And you have to find out an age-appropriate way to do that. What gives children a lot of strength is regularity. For instance, have a ritual every evening for the evening prayer. Have always the same way of celebrating birthday. We have this way that in the morning of your birthday, you get woken up with a little tray, with a candle, a tiny present, and some sweets on it. It's a family tradition. We do it since years. The children, even if they are already awake, they pretend that they're sleeping until we come in with a tray and with a candle. And so we try to have these traditions that then our children carry on. It's little things, but this gives stability, and this gives you the feeling that traditions are important. In my book, I speak about my Habsburg ancestors who had traditions of theater plays, music performances for birthdays, for celebrations, where the children together would play a little scene from a theater, where the children would perform little music places things. And they did this over the centuries. You can see it from the 16th century on. And this is something you can do in the family. Doesn't have to be the entire Midsummer Night's Dream of Shakespeare. It can be one scene, and the smallest ones just stand there as little elves. But these things give your children a basis and grounding.
I do love those types of ideas because I those are things that I wouldn't like off off my brain think about necessarily, even though I have a great interest in stuff like Shakespeare and stuff like that. But I don't think about that until you get the idea from your book. So I greatly appreciate that. Have you seen a commonality amongst like I mean, so you do this tradition on birthdays. Is there something similar or different that is across all Habsburgs or many Habsburgs? Do you see some commonalities there?
We're a very diverse family. We live in different countries. And you marry into families as a Habsburg that have very strong traditions of their own. So it's always a bit of a fight about how you do Christmas, how you do birthdays. It's very serious. I would say what we all have in common is faith. If you would make a poll among all the 400 to 500 Habsburgs, what is really important to them, they would probably say faith, and they would say, for instance, pilgrimages and Blessed Carol. We went to Madeira twice in the last 15 years with the entire family to visit a tomb of our ancestor, Blessed Carol. That's something I would say that all of us learn a bit of history at home. History is very important. We live in times where the very brilliant South American um, essayist and philosopher Gomez Davila, in a very cynical way, said the chief duty of every historian is to convince his generation that history begins with them. Um, it's ironic because that's exactly what some historians do. But I believe that it's incredibly important for children to grow up with the knowledge that they are part of a long history. And also, if you believe that the world begins anew every 2 days, and whatever you have whizzing through your head at the moment is right, um, then you will be an arrogant human being. If you have learned that people thought differently on many things even 20 years ago, or 30 or 50 or 100 or 200, and if you have learned history, then you will learn humility, and you will learn that you are not the center of the universe. So I think history is a strong topic in our family. We are not born with the knowledge about our family. We have to learn it with books, with talks, with talking to uncles and aunts, and I think that is something that we all have in common.
Yeah. Now you mentioned how our schools, our society, our the media we consume all want to shove an ideology and a bunch of nonsense down our children's throat. Um, Now, do you have suggestions or advice regarding dealing with sort of like homeschooling or education in general?
We were in the lucky situation to have had normal public school and homeschooling experiences in our family. We've experienced both. I can see the advantages and disadvantages of both. Um, I would have, in my youth, never thought about homeschooling because I believe that the public school system was far less broken than it is today. When I went to school, and even I noticed that things didn't go very well, and I was thankful for all the education I received at home before I came to school. Um, but nowadays, I can understand parents who feel that the best way for their children is homeschooling because they don't trust their public schools anymore because they either don't trust or can't afford private schools. Um, I know that there is this idea in our heads that we have to expose our children to the world as it is today because they have to toughen up and therefore we have to throw them out into the rough world, and then they. I think that's nonsense, absolute nonsense. I believe that children should be able to be children for a long time, and children should receive the values that are important to you. And if you don't find them in the school system, then and if the place in the world where you are allows homeschooling, and if you can afford it and can handle it as a couple and as a family, then that's a very serious alternative to public school or to private schooling. Um, I I I experience it as something very positive. I always had the impression that my children were far better formed than I was at my age, just because of the very personalized way that homeschooling can shape people. And the main fear, of course, for many people, and the main idea that people have about homeschooling is that you become a weirdo, that you don't have any friends, that you're not able to socially interact. But if you have a numerous family and you have 6, 7 siblings around you, this is never a danger. Now, our youngest daughter is still in there, and she's alone now. All the others have left. She feels she feels it's a tragedy that she doesn't have, but she has friends outside of our home too. So what I'm saying is homeschooling can be a very good alternative if it's the right place, if it's good for you as a couple, if it fits. But you can find public schools and private schools that give your children a good education. They do exist, but perhaps they may not be there around where you are. Then you might have to move. It's like with a parish. If you don't find a good parish, and if you really feel that liturgy and faith life is important for your family, then you might move to a diocese or to another state where you can find that. I know many families who do that, and I honestly I would really take that seriously.
Wonderfully said. Now, if you're looking to get the book, Building a Wholesome Family in a Broken World by Archduke Edward Habsburg, please check this out. The link will be in the description to go to Sophia Institute Press. You can also get it on Amazon, but I would suggest Sophia Institute, preferably going for a small Catholic company instead of a big behemoth like Amazon is always good in my book. Uh, Ambassador Habsburg, thank you for coming on the show. Anything to say before we go? It's a pleasure.
Yes, I would invite all of your listeners to follow me on Twitter, not because I want more followers, because it's a fun way to interact. I think, Connor, you know that I try to nurture a very wholesome and positive bubble around me, and it's possible to create such little corners on Twitter. Sorry, I'm saying Twitter. It's X, of course, but I'm old-fashioned and traditional. So on X, on X, and I follow me, and I still have less than 100,000 followers, so I can still interact with the people who reach out to me. I enjoy that, and that's one way. The other is take it seriously. Take it seriously. We said over the last 45 minutes, go out there, look for a spouse, found a family, read my book, and learn how to do it, and then have a large family. I'm hoping for 100 marriages and 800 children as a result of this book, with God's help.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone. God bless. Bye.
Bye bye.